Jack Mitchell stood tall as the U.S. horizon docked with the massive Nexus 9 space station. Through the viewport, the structure gleamed like a silver wheel against the blackness of space. As security officer for Earth's first diplomatic mission to the Galactic Confederation, Jack felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Nervous, Lieutenant. Ambassador Samantha Wright adjusted her formal uniform beside him. "Just focused, Mom," Jack replied. His eyes scanned the docking area, a habit from his Marine days. First impressions matter. The delegation of 12 humans followed Ambassador Wright through the airlock. Jack noticed how the artificial gravity felt slightly lighter than Earth's. The air smelled clean but strange, like nothing on Earth. Waiting for them was a group of 5 aliens. Their leader, a tall blue-skinned being with 4 arms, stepped forward. "Welcome to Nexus 9, humans of Earth. I am High Counselor Varen. The Confederation greets you in peace." His translator device made his words sound almost musical. Ambassador Wright bowed slightly. "We bring greetings from Earth. We are honored by this historic meeting." The aliens led them through wide corridors. Jack noticed how delicate the Confederation species seemed. Their movements were graceful but cautious. He had been briefed that most Confederation species evolved on worlds with lower gravity and fewer environmental dangers than Earth. They called planets like Earth Deathworlds. The main conference chamber was a large room with a circular table. Windows looked out onto a garden area where plants from 100 worlds grew together. The human delegation took their seats while Jack and 2 other security officers stood against the wall. As Ambassador Wright began her opening speech, Jack noticed a small movement in the corner of his eye. A panel in the ceiling slid open silently. "Ambassador." Jack lunged forward, but he was too late. Gas canisters dropped into the room, followed by armed figures in sealed suits. The gas wasn't meant for humans, but the Confederation representatives collapsed immediately. "Everyone down," Jack shouted, drawing his sidearm. He managed to fire twice before something hot tore through his side. The pain was intense, a plasma weapon. He fell to one knee, but kept his gun raised. Another shot hit him in the chest. Jack felt his lung collapse. He slumped against the wall, struggling to breathe. Through blurring vision, he saw the attackers rounding up the conscious humans. Ambassador Wright was arguing with their leader. "The Purity Front rejects contamination by Deathworlders," the leader announced. "Your execution will prevent Earth from joining the Confederation." Jack tried to stand but couldn't. Blood soaked his uniform. He knew these wounds were bad, probably fatal. But the delegation needed him. He couldn't fail them. With tremendous effort, Jack dragged himself to a service door as the attackers herded the humans out the main entrance. Every movement sent waves of agony through his body. His military training kicked in. Assess injuries, stop bleeding, make a plan. The plasma wounds had partially cauterized themselves, which was the only reason he wasn't already dead. His right lung wasn't working. At least 2 ribs were broken. He tore strips from his uniform to bind the worst wounds. Jack checked his communicator. No signal. They must be jamming communications. He had his sidearm with 3 shots remaining, a knife, and a small emergency kit. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. Jack knew that by Confederation standards, his wounds should have already killed him. They underestimated human resilience. That might be his only advantage. He pulled himself up using the wall for support. Each breath was torture, but he forced himself to take shallow breaths using his good lung. The mission wasn't over. His people were in danger. Jack Mitchell should have been dead, but he kept fighting. One painful step at a time, he started making his way through the service corridor. Somehow, he would save them. Jack paused in the dim service corridor to catch his breath. Each inhale sent knives of pain through his chest. He leaned against the wall, leaving a smear of blood. The station's emergency lights cast everything in a red glow. A noise made him freeze. Someone was coming. Jack readied his weapon despite his shaking hands. A thin, bird-like alien in a medical uniform peered around the corner. The alien had pale green skin and large golden eyes that widened at the sight of Jack. By the 7 moons, the alien gasped, "A human. You should be dead." Jack lowered his gun slightly. "Not yet. Who are you?" "Dr. Xylax, Confederation Medical Corps." The doctor approached cautiously, eyes fixed on Jack's wounds. "Those are direct plasma hits. How are you still conscious?" "Determination," Jack said through gritted teeth. "And anger." Dr. Xylax pulled out a small scanner and waved it over Jack's body. The device beeped rapidly. "Fascinating. Your lung is collapsed, you have severe internal bleeding, and your body temperature is falling. Yet you're still functioning." The doctor's head tilted. "Is this normal for humans?" Jack almost laughed, but it hurt too much. "Not normal, but possible." Dr. Xylax reached into a medical bag. "I must get you to safety. The Purity Front will kill you if they find you." "No," Jack said firmly. "They have our delegation. I need to find them. With these injuries, impossible, even for a Deathworlder." Jack pushed himself off the wall. "Watch me. You can either help or stay out of my way." Dr. Xylax's thin fingers fluttered nervously. "You'll die within hours without treatment. Then I have hours to save them." Jack took a painful step forward. "What do you know about the attackers?" The doctor hesitated, then sighed. "The Purity Front. Extremists who believe Deathworlders will contaminate the Confederation. They control the upper levels and the communication systems." "How many?" "Perhaps 20 fighters." Dr. Xylax looked at Jack with concern. "But they're armed, and you can barely stand." Jack checked his gun. "I've faced worse odds." The doctor made a chirping sound of disbelief. "Your species truly is remarkable. Or insane." He reached into his bag and pulled out a small injector. "This might help with the pain. It's not designed for humans, but—" Jack nodded, and Dr. Xylax pressed it against his neck. A cool sensation spread through his body, dulling the pain slightly. "Thank you," Jack said. "Now, where would they take hostages?" "The broadcast center, most likely. Level 4. Dr. Xylax pointed to a maintenance ladder. "This will take us close, but there are guards." Jack moved toward the ladder. Each step was agony, but the medicine helped him focus. "You're coming with me?" he asked. "Someone must document this remarkable biology in action," Dr. Xylax said, "and perhaps help keep you alive a little longer." Jack managed a weak smile and began climbing. The effort made fresh blood seep through his bandages. At the top, he had to stop, his vision swimming with black spots. Dr. Xylax watched him with scientific curiosity. "Your heart should have stopped by now. How do you continue?" Jack thought of Ambassador Wright and the others. "Humans don't give up easily, especially not on our people. A biological imperative." "Something like that." Jack peered through a small window in the maintenance door. 2 guards. Armed. Dr. Xylax looked alarmed. "We should find another way." Jack checked his gun again. "No time. They could be executing hostages already. You plan to fight in your condition." The doctor's voice rose in pitch. "That's suicide." "It's necessary," Jack replied, his voice cold with determination. "On Earth, we say, no man left behind." Dr. Xylax stared at him. "Is that worth dying for?" Jack nodded, his face pale but resolute. "Every time." The alien doctor looked at him with new understanding. "Then I will help you, human, though I still think you're insane." Jack gripped his weapon tighter, ignoring the blood dripping from his side. "That's another human trait. Now, let's move." Jack moved silently, despite his wounds. Years of training had made stealth second nature. Dr. Xylax followed, trying not to make noise with his light footsteps. They reached a corner. Jack peered around it carefully. The 2 guards stood at the end of the hallway, carrying plasma rifles. "Wait here," Jack whispered to Dr. Xylax. The doctor grabbed his arm. "You can't fight them." Jack didn't answer. He removed his bloody uniform jacket and tossed it into the corridor. When one guard went to investigate, Jack struck. Despite his injured state, his movements were precise. He knocked the first guard unconscious with the butt of his gun, then turned to face the second. The second guard fired. Jack felt the heat of the plasma shot pass his ear. He lunged forward, tackling the guard to the ground. There was a brief struggle before Jack rendered him unconscious too. Dr. Zulax emerged, eyes wide. That was impossible. Jack was leaning against the wall, fresh blood seeping through his bandages. Not impossible, just difficult. They took the guards' weapons and communicators. Jack listened to the radio chatter for a moment. They're keeping the hostages in the broadcast center, like you said, planning to execute them in 1 hour. As they moved down the corridor, they heard footsteps approaching. Jack pushed Dr. Zolax into a side room and followed. Through a crack in the door, they watched a human woman in a security uniform walk past, checking rooms. "That's not one of the attackers," Jack whispered. "She's station security." Jack opened the door. "Officer, over here." The woman spun around, her hand on her weapon. When she saw Jack's condition, her eyes widened. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Lieutenant Jack Mitchell, Earth Diplomatic Security. This is Dr. Zylax." The woman lowered her weapon slightly. "Security Chief Kira Collins. What happened to you?" "Plasma shots. Purity Front has our delegation hostage." Kira looked at his wounds with disbelief. "How are you still standing?" Dr. Zulax made a chittering sound. "That's what I asked. Apparently, it's a human thing." Kira holstered her weapon. "I was off duty when they attacked. Been trying to assess the situation." "They've taken over the station's systems," Jack said. "Planning to execute the Earth delegation in less than an hour." "We need to call for help," Kira said. "Communications are jammed," Dr. Zelax replied. "And the Confederation fleet is 2 days away." Jack pushed himself off the wall, wincing. "We don't have 2 days. We need a plan now." Kira studied him. "You should be in medical. Those wounds will kill me eventually." Jack finished for her. "But not before I save our people." Kira seemed to make a decision. "There's an environmental control room 3 levels down. We could alter the atmosphere in the broadcast center." Jack nodded. "Make it harder for them to fight while we move in." "It won't affect humans as much as other species," Dr. Zoilax added. "Their bodies adapt to environmental changes better than most Confederation species. Another advantage of being Deathworlders," Jack said. They moved through the maintenance corridors, avoiding patrols. Jack's condition was getting worse. His skin was pale, and his breathing was shallow. Dr. Zelax gave him another injection, but it seemed less effective this time. As they reached the environmental control room, they encountered 2 more Purity Front guards. Kira took one down with a precise shot. The other fired at Jack, grazing his arm. Despite the new wound, Jack managed to disable the guard. Inside the control room, Kira accessed the systems. "I can lower oxygen levels in the broadcast center. It won't harm humans much, but it will weaken the Purity Front members." Jack nodded, leaning heavily against the console. "Do it." "It will take about 15 minutes to take effect," Kira said. "Good," Jack replied. "That gives us time to get there." Dr. Zelax scanned Jack again with his medical device. His expression was grim. "Your vital signs are failing. You should rest." Jack straightened up, ignoring the pain. "Not yet. How many guards at the broadcast center?" "At least 6, Kira said, plus their leader." "We need a distraction," Jack said. "Something to split their attention." Despite his worsening condition, Jack's mind was still sharp. He began outlining a plan, his voice growing weaker, but his determination never faltering. Jack, Kira, and Dr. Zelax moved carefully through the maintenance tunnels toward the broadcast center. Jack was leading despite his wounds. Each step was a battle against his failing body. "The atmosphere changes should be taking effect now," Kira whispered, checking her tablet. "Oxygen levels are down 20% in the broadcast area." Dr. Zelax nodded. That will make the Purity Front members sluggish. Their species need high oxygen levels. Jack paused, leaning against the wall. His breathing was labored, and fresh blood had soaked through his makeshift bandages. Dr. Zelax scanned him again with his medical device. "Lieutenant," the doctor said quietly, "your body is shutting down. Internal bleeding is getting worse." "How long?" Jack asked. Dr. Zelax hesitated. For any Confederation species, death would have occurred hours ago. For you, perhaps 30 minutes before organ failure. Kira looked at Jack with concern. "We should change the plan." "You can't." "I can," Jack interrupted. "And I will. The plan stays the same." He checked his weapon. "Get me to the broadcast center. That's all that matters." They reached a junction in the tunnels. Jack could barely stand now, but he refused to stop. Dr. Zelax gave him a final injection. "This is the strongest stimulant I have," the doctor said. "It might keep you functioning a little longer, but it will accelerate the damage." "Worth it," Jack said as the medication spread through his system. His vision cleared slightly, and the pain dulled. "Let's move." They reached a maintenance hatch that opened near the broadcast center. Through a small window, they could see inside. Ambassador Wright and the other humans were tied to chairs in the center of the room. Around them, several Purity Front members stood guard, though they seemed to be breathing heavily due to the reduced oxygen. At the front of the room, a tall, reptilian alien was preparing a broadcast system. This was Commander Vrex, the leader of the attack. "Time for the distraction," Jack said. Kira nodded and activated her tablet. In the distance, alarms began to sound as she triggered fire suppressant systems in other parts of the station. Several guards hurried out to investigate. Only 3 remained with Commander Vrex and the hostages. "Now we go in," Jack said. "Kira, take the guard on the left. I'll handle the other 2. Dr. Zelax looked at him in disbelief. "You can barely walk." Jack managed a pained smile. "They don't know that." He handed Dr. Zelax a small device. "When I give the signal, press this. It will shut down the lights for 10 seconds. Jack positioned himself at the door. His body felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. The stimulant was working, but he knew it was only temporary. "Ready?" he asked. Kira nodded. Jack pressed his communicator 3 times. The lights went out. In the darkness, Jack moved with surprising speed. Years of combat training guided his actions. He took down 1 guard with a precise strike, then turned to the second. The guard fired wildly, missing Jack in the darkness. Jack heard Kira's weapon fire and knew she had handled her target. He focused on the remaining guard, who was now grappling with him. Despite his weakened state, Jack managed to overpower the alien and knock him unconscious. The lights came back on. Jack stood in the center of the room, swaying slightly. Blood dripped from his reopened wounds. Commander Vrex stared at him in shock. "Impossible," the commander hissed. "You should be dead." Jack raised his weapon. "That's what everyone keeps saying." Commander Vrex lunged for Ambassador Wright, putting a blade to her throat. "Stay back, human." Jack didn't move. His aim remained steady despite his failing body. "You won't survive this," Commander Vrex said. "Look at you. You're already dead." "Maybe," Jack replied, "but I'm still fighting." Ambassador Wright's eyes met Jack's. She gave him a slight nod, understanding passing between them. Jack knew what he had to do, even if it might be the last thing he ever did. Time seemed to slow as Jack faced Commander Vrex. The room was silent except for Jack's labored breathing. Blood pooled at his feet, but his eyes remained clear and focused. "Release her," Jack said, his voice steady despite his condition. Commander Vrex pressed the blade closer to Ambassador Wright's throat. "Drop your weapon or she dies." Jack didn't move. "If she dies, so do you." The commander laughed. "You can barely stand. Your threats mean nothing." "That's where you're wrong," Jack said. I've been shot twice with plasma weapons. I've lost enough blood to kill most species. Yet here I stand. He took a step forward. Do you really want to test what else I can endure? Uncertainty flickered in Commander Vrex's eyes. The reduced oxygen was affecting him, making his movements slower. Jack saw the opening he needed. In one fluid motion, Jack dropped his weapon and lunged forward. The movement reopened his wounds, sending fresh waves of pain through his body. Commander Vrex slashed with his blade, catching Jack across the arm. But Jack didn't stop. He crashed into the commander, knocking him away from Ambassador Wright. They both fell to the floor, struggling for control of the blade. Despite Jack's weakened state, his grip was like iron. This is impossible, Commander Vrex gasped. Your wounds. That's humanity for you, Jack grunted, twisting the blade from the alien's grasp. We don't know when to quit. With the last of his strength, Jack pinned the commander to the floor. Kira rushed forward, securing Vrex with restraints. Jack tried to stand but couldn't. The stimulant was wearing off, and his body was finally reaching its limits. He collapsed to the floor as Dr. Xylax and Kira freed the hostages. Ambassador Wright hurried to Jack's side. Lieutenant Mitchell, hold on. Help is coming. Jack's vision was darkening around the edges. He could hear Dr. Xylax shouting for medical supplies. The doctor's scanner beeped frantically as it registered Jack's failing vital signs. Fascinating, the doctor muttered as he worked. By all medical science, he should have died hours ago. His heart is still beating despite catastrophic blood loss. A young delegate named Eric Patterson joined the doctor. I have medical training. What can I do? Together, they worked to stabilize Jack. Dr. Xylax used Confederation medical technology, while Eric applied human first aid techniques. The combination was unorthodox but effective. Stay with us, Lieutenant, Ambassador Wright urged, holding Jack's hand. That's an order. Jack tried to speak but couldn't find the strength. His consciousness was fading fast. The last thing he heard was Dr. Xylax's amazed voice. His body is entering some kind of self-preservation state. I've never seen anything like it. Darkness claimed Jack. He woke to the sound of beeping machines. Opening his eyes slowly, Jack found himself in the station's medical bay. Ambassador Wright sat beside his bed, reading a report. When she noticed he was awake, she smiled. Welcome back, Lieutenant. You've been unconscious for 3 days. Jack tried to speak, his voice barely a whisper. The others. All safe, thanks to you. She set down her report. The Confederation security forces arrived 6 hours after we were freed. They've arrested all the Purity Front members. Dr. Xylax entered the room, accompanied by several other alien doctors. They all stared at Jack with scientific curiosity. Our miracle patient is awake, Dr. Xylax announced. Lieutenant, you've become quite famous throughout the Confederation. No one has ever survived wounds like yours. Jack managed a weak smile. First time for everything. The High Council wants to meet you when you're recovered, Ambassador Wright said. Your actions have changed perspectives about humans. Dr. Xylax nodded enthusiastically. I've begun writing a medical paper about human physiology. Your remarkable survival has opened new areas of research. Jack closed his eyes, exhaustion taking over again. Just doing my job. As he drifted back to sleep, he heard Dr. Xylax say to the other doctors, perhaps being a Deathworlder isn't such a bad thing after all. Over the next week, Jack slowly regained his strength. His recovery amazed the Confederation medical staff. They had never seen anyone heal from such severe injuries. Dr. Xylax visited daily, often bringing other doctors to observe the human's recovery. Jack became used to being studied like a science project. Your lung has almost fully regenerated, Dr. Xylax announced during one visit. Most species would need artificial replacements after such damage. Jack sat up in bed, wincing slightly. Humans are pretty good at healing. Good? It's remarkable. The doctor's eyes gleamed with excitement. Your cells multiply at rates we thought impossible without causing cancer. Ambassador Wright visited that afternoon with news. The High Council is ready to meet you tomorrow. They're very interested in hearing your story firsthand. Will I be able to walk by then? Jack asked. Absolutely not, Dr. Zylax said firmly. You'll use a hover chair. Jack didn't argue. Though he was healing quickly by Confederation standards, he knew his body needed more time. The next day, Security Chief Kira came to escort him to the council chambers. Jack wore a fresh uniform and sat in the hover chair, feeling slightly uncomfortable with the attention. You've become quite famous, Kira told him as they moved through the corridors. Everyone's talking about the human who wouldn't die. Jack smiled wryly. Not exactly the diplomatic first impression Earth was hoping for. Actually, it might be better than what we planned, Ambassador Wright said, joining them. The Confederation respects strength and resilience. You've demonstrated both. The council chamber was a large, circular room with seats for representatives from dozens of worlds. Jack's hover chair was positioned in the center, with Ambassador Wright beside him. High Counselor Varen, the blue-skinned, four-armed alien who had first greeted the Earth delegation, addressed the room. We are here today to honor Lieutenant Jack Mitchell of Earth. His voice echoed through the chamber. His actions during the recent terrorist attack have demonstrated qualities we find both impressive and valuable. Jack listened as the High Counselor described the attack and rescue in formal terms. Then Dr. Zelax was called to speak about Jack's medical condition during the crisis. By any Confederation medical standard, Lieutenant Mitchell should have died within minutes of receiving his injuries, Dr. Zelax stated. Yet he not only survived but continued to function at a high level for hours afterward. Murmurs spread through the chamber as holographic images of Jack's injuries appeared in the air. The images showed the damage to his lung and the extensive blood loss. This is not merely a case of unusual physical endurance, Dr. Zelax continued. It demonstrates a psychological resilience our medical science has never documented before. The human ability to push through physical limitations represents an evolutionary path entirely different from Confederation species. After Dr. Zylax finished, Kira spoke about Jack's tactical decisions during the rescue. Her account earned appreciative nods from the security-minded council members. Finally, it was Jack's turn to speak. Ambassador Wright helped him stand from the hover chair. Though still weak, Jack insisted on standing to address the council. I did what any human would have done, he said simply. We don't leave our people behind, even at the cost of your own life. High Counselor Varen asked. Jack nodded. Especially then. The High Counselor's four hands made a complex gesture of respect. This quality is rare and valuable. It has made us reconsider our understanding of Deathworlders. A new voice spoke from the side of the chamber. Perhaps what we once feared as dangerous, we should now recognize as strength. Jack turned to see Commander Vrex, now in restraints and guarded by security officers. You were going to execute us, Jack said, surprised to see the Purity Front leader. Yes, Vrex admitted, because I feared what I did not understand. I was wrong. The room fell silent. Jack wasn't sure how to respond to this unexpected admission. 1 month later, Jack stood at the observation window of Nexus 9, watching ships come and go. His wounds had healed, leaving only scars as reminders of his near-death experience. He was scheduled to return to Earth tomorrow on the U.S. horizon. Enjoying the view, Lieutenant. Ambassador Wright joined him at the window. Yes, ma'am. Still getting used to seeing alien ships up close. She smiled. Well, you'll be seeing a lot more of them. The Confederation Council has approved Earth's membership application. We begin the integration process next month. Jack nodded. Good news. They're calling it the Mitchell Effect, she said. Your actions changed minds throughout the Confederation. Species that feared Deathworlders now see value in our resilience. Jack looked uncomfortable with the attention. I was just doing my job. It was more than that, a familiar voice said. Dr. Zylax approached, carrying a datapad. You've revolutionized Confederation medicine. My paper on human physiology has been downloaded 1 million times. The doctor looked different now. He stood straighter and wore a new uniform with special markings. Congratulations on your promotion, Jack said, noticing the change. Head of Cynobiology, Dr. Zolak said proudly. All because I was the first to document human healing abilities. He paused. I have a request, Lieutenant. The Confederation Academy wants to establish a new training program, and they need an instructor. Jack raised an eyebrow. What kind of program? Teaching Confederation security forces about human resilience and tactical thinking, Dr. Zolax explained. No one is better qualified than you. Before Jack could respond, Kira joined them. He's right, Jack. Our security teams could learn a lot from you. Jack looked surprised. You're asking me to stay here? As a teacher? Ambassador Wright nodded. It would be a valuable position. You'd be the first human instructor at the academy. Jack stared out at the stars, considering the offer. I'm a soldier, not a teacher. Sometimes the best teachers are those who lived what they teach, Dr. Zolak said. Your experience is unique. A group of young Confederation security cadets walked by, staring at Jack with obvious awe. One of them, a small purple-skinned alien, whispered loudly, "That's him, the human who wouldn't die." Jack smiled slightly. Perhaps there was value in sharing what he knew. What would I teach exactly? He asked. Survival, persistence, how to continue when biology says stop. Dr. Zulax replied. Qualities that saved your life and the lives of your delegation. Jack considered for a moment, then nodded. I'll do it. 3 months later, Jack stood before his first class at the Confederation Academy. 20 cadets from 15 different species looked back at him. Some appeared nervous, others curious. Welcome to Advanced Survival Tactics, Jack began. My name is Instructor Mitchell. I'm from Earth, a planet you might know as a death world. The cadets murmured among themselves. One raised a tentacle-like limb. Instructor, is it true you survived 2 direct plasma hits? Jack nodded. Yes, but that's not what this class is about. It's not about being physically stronger or harder to kill. It's about something more important. He activated a display screen showing images from various worlds. Every species has strengths. Talarians can process complex equations instantly. Vrekians can breathe underwater. Humans? We just don't know when to quit. Jack walked among the cadets. In this class, you'll learn that your greatest survival tool isn't your body. It's your mind and your will. At the back of the room, Dr. Zylax and Kira watched with approval. Next to them stood Commander Vrex, now released from detention and serving as a cultural liaison. He'll be a good teacher, Kira said. Dr. Zylax nodded. He's already taught us so much. The Confederation will never see humans the same way again. As Jack continued his lesson, a young cadet asked, But what if we face wounds that should be fatal? Jack smiled. Then you keep fighting anyway. That's the most important lesson I can teach you.